Welcome to the Ringer NFL show. Sheil Kapadia here with Stephen Ruiz and Diante Lee. Week 17. Football everywhere. Everywhere you look, any day you look. That's the theme. Wednesday football, Thursday football, Saturday football, Sunday football, Monday football. Gentlemen, I'm just telling you, this is a glimpse into the future. Like, I see some of the headlines like Christmas Day is here to stay. I'm like, no. That's not what this is. This is like, I don't know if it's going to be 10 years from now, 20 years from now. It's going to look like this every single week, Ruiz. I feel like I make this prediction every year, and it's getting closer and closer to it.
Yeah, you were saying that with a smile on your face, but I could see the pain in your eyes, and I could see through to your soul. No, I'm anticipating like Wednesday night football being a thing in like 2028, maybe. I don't know, maybe even sooner than that. I wish LeBron was right about Christmas belonging to the NBA. Nothing belongs to any other league except for the NFL. The NFL just chooses to let you have that until they decide no longer. We're going to take that day too.
Yeah, I don't know if you guys saw, like about 15 minutes before we hopped on, they just put out a report that 65 million people total tuned in to the Christmas Day broadcast. And I'm trying to conceptualize what it's going to take for anybody else to even come in the realm of competing with the NFL in terms of just dominating viewership. To get 65 million people to tune into NFL games that are not on terrestrial TV on Christmas Day of all days, we're going to be the only day off we're probably going to have from playing football games will be Tuesday. I think that
I'm not even sure about that. Yeah,
we are approaching a world where they're going to dominate the entire week from Labor Day to President's Day weekend.
Yeah, LeBron was right. NBA did have the better games, but that doesn't really matter. Like when you sit down to watch a game, you don't know if it's going to be a good game game or not. So I never understood that.
Didn't have Diante. That's what the NBA didn't have. So
yeah, that's true. That's what the household in the Kapadia family, everyone was. That was the 10, 15 minutes when everybody got quiet, focused in, all ages, fan, non-fan, everyone watched this. And then after that, everyone went their separate ways. So
even the Texans gave up after that.
Even the Texans, yeah, maybe a little early. Yeah, maybe even a little before that, they gave up. We're going to talk about that game, Texans-Ravens, in a minute. We're going to start with Chiefs-Steelers, kind of break down what we saw on Christmas, because these are four teams that are in the playoffs. What does it mean going forward, what we saw for these teams as we approach the postseason here? Then we'll look ahead a little bit to what we've got week 17 this weekend, specifically Packers, Vikings. And of course, we will make our picks. I'm just warning you, this is one of my weeks where I don't have the picks lined up yet. I'm picking between, 6, 8, 10. The Kapadia gut that's always wrong. Where is it going to lead me when we make these picks? So we will do all of that as well. But let's start with the first game on Christmas. Chiefs, Steelers, blowout. Chiefs 29, Steelers 10. And I just have to lead with the question I think I just asked you guys last week. And that's is it happening again? I might have even phrased it the exact same way. Is it happening again? Because, man, that Chiefs team looked good. They look like they're peaking at the right time. The last 2 weeks, Texans and Steelers, these are playoff teams. Like, I don't think any of us think they're great teams, but they're playoff teams. They both got top 10 offenses, and the Chiefs have gone up and down the field on those two teams. And now if they want, they don't have to play Patrick Mahomes. They don't have to play Chris Jones. They don't have to play whatever stars, Travis Kelce, whoever. They don't want to play for the next 24 days until they're hosting the divisional round. So let's start with you, Ruiz. We've, again, talked about the Chiefs probably more than any other team this year, I would say, because it has been a fascinating season. Where are you now with what you've seen as they get ready for the playoffs?
Yeah, these last 2 weeks have gone about as well as you could have realistically expected from the Chiefs. They hits on some deep passes yesterday. They hit one on Justin Watson. I thought I think they're starting to figure out a way to get Xavier Worthy involved in the offense where he's going to be a high volume player rather than a guy who just catches maybe one or two balls and maybe it goes for a big play like we saw earlier in the season. I think the defense has kind of figured out some things that we had questions about like a month ago. They're getting more pass rush since Charles Omenihu has been back. And that was without Chris Jones there yesterday. The offensive line has played better since Joe Thuney has moved to left tackle. I think that's impacted the interior run blocking a little bit, and negatively so, but they are starting to fill some of these holes that we had concerns about 2 weeks ago. And I mean, just Patrick Mahomes, I don't know what else to say about the guy. Like, even I totally forgot that he had a high ankle sprain when I was watching the game yesterday.
Yeah,
it was at the top of my mind when I was watching the Texans game, obviously. But yesterday, like, he scrambles on the first drive for a first down, and you just totally forget about it. And then he hits a couple throws downfield. He has like the little flip pass on 3rd and 11 to Samaje Perine. He has another play where he's like climbing the pocket and dumps it off. So he doesn't look limited, and he's going to have 2 to 3 weeks off that ankle to get better. I think Spagnuolo has 2 to 3 weeks to kind of figure out that secondary, which is still an issue because of injuries. Obviously, like Jamari Conor went out. Obviously, Jalen Watson has been out for a long time. I think they found something with Christian Roland-Wallace in the slot the last 2 weeks. I don't know if that's going to continue when Conor comes back, but Conor was not playing well before he got injured. So maybe that will be something new, and maybe that will improve the defense a little bit. So I think they're firing on all cylinders. I think there's still question marks about like how good this team is compared to like past Super Bowl teams for the Chiefs and how they compare to the Ravens and Bills. But I think they've answered any questions about their status as contenders.
Where are you at with it, Diante? Still holding out or no? Did they get you with this one?
They haven't. No, I would say, well, I don't want to say flatly no, right? Because they are playing better. They're actually playing their best football on the offensive end, at least right now. It's a little confounding for me because it seems like over the last like month, 5 weeks, everybody's forgotten the fact that you can't play man against an Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes offense.
That's true.
They've seen 54 snaps of man coverage over the last 3 weeks. Now, part of that is identity, right? Houston has been a man team all year long. Pittsburgh has been a man team for like the last 25 years, right? And they played Cleveland before that, who also has 2 high-level corners, and they succeeded oftentimes playing man, and we're able to give them some trouble. Obviously, that's the game where Patrick Mahomes hurts his ankle as well. So maybe the numbers at the end of the game are a little bit skewed because Kansas City basically sat on the ball after he twisted his ankle and they took him out for Carson Wentz. But I wonder whether or not this is actually reflective of the kind of defenses they're going to see when the playoffs come around. That's not to say the good things aren't happening. I think that they're happening in ways that maybe we didn't predict, right? They trade for DeAndre Hopkins. You think you're trading for an X receiver. Truth of the matter is that he's not that. At this stage in his career, not a ball-winning X receiver, but what he is a guy who can take, those third down, high leverage targets at times, and you see them using him in stacks and bunches, and defenses still have to respect his presence, right? So you see him opening up a lot of things for Noah Gray, for Justin Watt, for Travis Kelce, for Hollywood Brown, who's now back. That's another guy who, now that he's in the lineup, you kind of see everybody starting to get pegged into more, into better reflections of what their skill set is and where they should be in terms of target share. Steven mentioned Xavier Worthy. Now he's not being asked to run the drag route that makes the whole offense go on third downs. You can start to use him in a few different ways. It doesn't have to be reverses and big play action shot plays. You can start working him in the intermediate areas. You can work him on more stationary routes where he can catch and run after. And then all of this, I think, kind of revolves around where Patrick Mahomes is at. Steven, you made the point about his ankle looking better. I thought that his navigation around the pocket was as good as we've seen all year without him needing to scramble. But I do think for all the gains they've had offensively, I don't think they're going to be defended this way when it comes to playing Baltimore, when it comes to playing Buffalo. I don't think if they saw the Steelers again, they would defend them the same way, right? This is a tail end of a 3-game and 11-day stretch. It's a short week. You don't have an opportunity to really put in the game plan that you might want to against a high level offense. I think that the conversation is really more so about how close are they to being the kind of contender we've seen in years past, which I don't think they are, and whether or not that's going to be good enough to keep the Baltimores and the Buffaloes at bay this season.
That's honest. That's a really good point that I hadn't really considered, that they have been playing defenses that I would call like attacking defenses. And the defenses that you're going to face at the top of the AFC are more passive defenses, almost like in response to the Chiefs and what they've done over the last 5 years. We've seen all these like zone, and we talked about the zone and the 2 high and all that. Right. And these are teams that don't really conform with the rest of the league. I'm talking about Houston, and Houston does play, some quarters, but they are, like Diante said, especially on passing downs, a man team. And the Steelers are just, they're playing 90s ball. They've been playing 90s ball. They've been playing the same style of defense for like 25 years, like Diante said. So that wasn't a point I had considered, but I do think it's a good point. And another red flag from this game for me was the way in which the Steelers were able to kind of put tight ends on the field and kind of bully the Chiefs. The success they did have on offense was running the football. and running the football with big bodies on the field, like Darnell Washington on the field, who's essentially a 6 offensive lineman out there, I think really meshes well with what Buffalo does and how they run the football, bringing on those extra tight ends and that 6th offensive lineman. And even Baltimore has done that. They play with multiple tight ends. They bring some offensive linemen onto the field also. So, and then obviously Derrick Henry. So that was a red flag for me. Is like, how are they going to be able to defend those run games? And we all know like those run games are set up to open up the explosive passing game, which has been an issue at times for this Chiefs team.
Yeah, the playoff game last year against the Bills played that way. They went methodically up and down the field, very efficient. They still end up losing that game. I didn't think I was going to be feeling this way about the Chiefs going into the playoffs. I thought I was going to be in a spot where I said they're not as good as their record says. They've got, it was just 2-3 weeks ago where it's flaws at big flaws, left tackle, both tackles, wide receiver, the pass rush. Is it good enough? Defensive backs. And some of those might still exist, but man, I can't shake what I've seen the last 2 weeks. You mentioned those other defenses might play a better style. And maybe the Ravens, you can say, no, and we'll talk about them here again in a couple minutes. You can say, hey, this defense is coming on strong. We talked about the Bills defense recently, and what's our concern is their pass defense. So they can play a certain style, but do they have the guys that's really going to make that impactful? The way Mahomes just adjusts to having the injured ankle, the ball's coming out, and what was it, 2.34 seconds, whatever it was, one of the fastest times, and it's just completion. And so the answers they found were a little unpredictable. Joe Thuney moving to left tackle, and all of a sudden your pass pro is looking better. That's a fix. And then Hollywood Brown, we didn't know, is he going to come back at all? And now you add that with the DeAndre Hopkins and everything else that you guys laid out, and it's all fitting together pretty nicely here to the point where they're the Super Bowl favorites again. According to FanDuel, they're at plus 390. I just checked before we came on. It's gone up and down. It was the Lions. Is it the Bills? And now, as we sit here going into week 17, the favorites are the team that's looking to three-peat, and that's the Kansas City Chiefs.
It's almost like they fell into these things like out of desperation. Like the left tackle thing with Joe Thuney was definitely that.
Yeah.
But getting the ball out quickly and getting into the gun a little bit more and running more RPO. I think that's just a reaction to the fact that Patrick Mahomes can't move. He usually moves, and it's helped. And I don't know if they're going to stick with this after his ankle heals, but I think it would be the smart thing to do.
And they can.
I do think there's a little bit of that survivor's bias that where we're kind of ascribing some things based to them doing what they need to do to get by on a weekly basis. But that's a credit to them. I think, as a matter of fact, before that Cleveland game or coming out of that Cleveland game, one of the points I made about the Chiefs was with Houston and Pittsburgh coming up, knowing that those are man-heavy, aggressive fronts. This, to me, was going to be the test to see whether or not this offense had issues or whether it was broken. I think what we got out of the last 2 weeks is that it's definitely not broken. They still function at a high level when you give them the looks that they are built best to attack, which is playing a lot of tight coverage, trying to press at the line of scrimmage, trying to play man, the more blitz heavy defenses. Patrick Mahomes will always have an answer for that. And that is maybe the best style of defense for Andy Reid to game plan for. Especially under, with the tight schedule, right? I don't know if on short weeks or coming out of bye weeks, if any coach is usually better prepared to get his team over the hump than an Andy Reid football team. And that's existed for 2 decades. Sheil, I know you know that that's been a story on him since his time as a head coach in Philadelphia, right? Is that he can get a game plan together no matter how much time you allot to him. So I do think that now that they get a chance to rest, if we're spinning this forward, that's where I might be leaning a little bit more on it's going to be tough to beat this team in Arrowhead. They get 3 weeks, if not almost a month, to get everybody's body right.
Crazy.
Spagnuolo gets to self-scout, even if they don't get their full complement of defensive backs together, even if Chris Jones remains banged up and isn't 100% the rest of the way, you're giving the two of, if not the 2 best play callers in the NFL almost a month to self-scout and prepare for what they're going to see in the AFC playoffs. And that's going to make it really tough to try to keep this team away from New Orleans in the Super Bowl.
I do like Sheil's point, though, that the Bills theoretically philosophically are set up to stop what the Chiefs do, but their defense stinks. I think the Ravens are the one team that have the talent on defense and that are playing well and then have the style of defense to stop them. The only problem is Baltimore is probably going to have to go to Buffalo, almost certainly going to have to go through Buffalo to get a chance at the Chiefs. And then they're going to have to go to Arrowhead, even if they win that game, which we know like that's been a house of horrors for that team for the last couple of years. So I want to be different. I want to pick a different team to win.
You want
the
change,
AFC, but
yeah,
it's probably going to be the Chiefs again. We're going to be back at the Super Bowl asking questions to Patrick Mahomes, finding out a different way to ask him the same questions we've been asking him the last two.
I mean, the point about the 1-2 is just so big for them. One, just because you get guys rested. Two, because of what Diante is saying about give Andy Reid, on a short week he's good, and then on a bye he's almost unbeatable. But the biggest thing is, we have said on this show for, I don't even know the first time, we might have been week 8. We were like, there are 3 teams in the AFC that can get to the Super Bowl. And then there is a drop off after that. And of the 3 teams, 2 are going to have to play each other in the divisional round. And the other teams, the Chiefs,
Kansas City.
They're going to get Houston or Pittsburgh or the Chargers or the Broncos. And I don't know if it's hyperbole to say if one of those teams goes into Arrowhead and wins, it'll be like one of the biggest upsets in the last, 2 decades in the NFL playoffs. Like that,
I'll eat this podcast. I don't know how we're going to make it work. I don't know. You can't print it out, but I'll eat the podcast. I'll eat this episode of the podcast somehow.
So they get the break, they get the weaker opponent, and then the big game they have to play is going to be at home. We know nothing's a given, but man, for a 3-peat path, that is about as good as you could ever hope for. All right. There was another team that played in this game, kind of. The Pittsburgh Steelers, who have now been outscored the last 3 weeks, 90-40 against the Eagles, Ravens, and Chiefs. And I want to start this one because something doesn't smell right in Pittsburgh. I know it's a Mike Tomlin coach team. I don't know how much attention you guys paid to like the post-game comments or the interviews. A lot with defensive players, TJ Watt, Cam Hayward, Alex Highsmith, stuff about not being on the same page. And if you have 10 guys doing their job, but the 11th doesn't do it, then you're screwed. And you got to have want to, which does that suggest not everybody? It's very weird stuff where I'm generally like, I give Tomlin the benefit of the doubt. It sort of feels like a team that's spiraling right now. And if you zoom out, you would probably just say they're kind of coming back to where they really should be if you sort of look at the talent. I think they've still overachieved for the season, but I am curious to see how this last week goes and how ugly does it get in the playoffs. Because I don't know, Ruiz, you were nodding your head. Something feels off, not just that they're not playing well, but just culture, locker room. I don't know. It's all vague, but it doesn't feel like it's supposed to feel for a Mike Tomlin coach team.
Yeah, especially those veterans. Like they're saying that for a reason. They know what they're doing when they say they're trying to accomplish something with saying that. Like Watt, Hayward, those guys. And then like on the other side of the ball, you have George Pickens not running his vertical route, not taking up the corner or the safety read, and then the ball gets picked when Russell Wilson throws it to Freiermuth. So I agree. And like the thing with Tomlin isn't that he's like putting out these fires. It's that he's like sheltering these fires from getting outside of the building in the past. Like Antonio Brown and Le'Veon Bell, there were still issues in that locker room. Ben Roethlisberger too, put him on that list with his radio show back then. It just never really affected them on the field. I think this is more like if they were winning these games, we wouldn't be hearing this. But they went up against a tough schedule and they got kind of exposed over the last 3 weeks. And I mean, people get upset and they say stuff and they're going to start pointing out issues in the locker room. And I think like if you read between the lines, there's something going on in the secondary. I think people are kind of hinting at the fact that it might be Minkah Fitzpatrick. I don't know, but
look, man, if you look at where the comments are coming from and where they're not coming from, there's really only too many people. There's only so many people that they could be referencing about making mistakes. I don't know, right? I haven't spent enough time really diving into every last detail about how they're trying to cover on the back end to be able to ascribe blame to anyone specifically. But I know that Marco Bulli, our old colleague, Sheil and I at The Athletic, was on Pat McAfee's show and was saying that like a lot of the players have maybe wanted to say something about Minkah for a little while and just haven't. You know, I mean, that's an all pro level player, guy who's made a bunch of plays. He is their star safety, so they do need him. I do find it interesting that they seem to be pointing so directly at this issue, because I think on the whole, Sheil, you're right. You play Baltimore, you play Philadelphia, you play Kansas City. You're talking about two elite quarterbacks and a team with two really high level receivers on them, and you're a high level man team, I think at a certain point, regression was going to hit this team no matter what. Not that I expect an NFL locker room to feel that way. When they're winning games, you want to keep winning. So I'm not shocked that there's frustration, especially given that it's been 3 blowouts and they've been giving up more explosive plays, more chunk plays period than you would expect. I also think on the other side, it's very convenient for them to have somebody to point at on the defensive end, because they've also had a quarterback problem for the last month. And we just don't talk about it because the defense is giving up points in a way we're not familiar with for a Pittsburgh unit. But they haven't been able to generate any explosive offense over the last month or so. And bringing George Pickens back didn't seem to fix that in any particular way. Russell Wilson just looks like the same guy he did last season in Denver, where the splash plays can be there when everything's clean, but you still see him bailing out of clean pockets. You see him creating his own pressure at times. The ball security is an issue, trying to fit the ball into a tight window. I know that Nate Burleson was kind of making his case that it might not have been 100% on Russ, but in any case, the decision-making, the accuracy, the effectiveness pushing the ball downfield hasn't been there the way it was in October and early November. And I think that that's just as much a problem for this team heading into the playoffs as whatever is going on the back end coverage wise.
Yeah, that Freiermuth interception, I think Pickens can be blamed for not running this route, but Russell Wilson has to see that and has to see Justin Reed that's unoccupied directly in the path that he's throwing it. And I thought his placement, even if I thought he could have maybe fit that ball in there.
Yeah, it was an off-target throw.
Yeah,
too.
but he put his back shoulder
was bad
on
that throw.
And Diante brings up a good point. The guy's not protecting the football. We saw the fumble where he kind of had put the ball on the ground. I think it was a 3rd down play. And that's been the case the last couple of weeks. He fumbles the football and he throws into the tight windows. And that's partly the offense, the throwing into tight windows, because whenever you throw downfield, it's going to be a tight window, but he's not protecting the football. And that's always been the thing we've talked about, especially in regards to this quarterback conundrum going back to August. Who was going to protect the football? Who would Mike Tomlin trust? And honestly, if you look back at the stats, I think Russ has been a little more consistent down to down as a passer, but in terms of protecting the football, Justin Fields was a lot better. Now, maybe the offensive coordinator, Arthur Smith, was kind of holding his hand there and preventing those turnovers before they happen. I know they weren't attacking the middle of the field, but I think it does stand out that there's almost no difference between the young quarterback and the old quarterback. And if anything, the younger quarterback was protecting the football a little bit more.
Yeah, it really has been a bunch of different things. I mean, the teams you mentioned, these are 3 of the 6 teams that can, win the Super Bowl. I think it's a short list. They get them back to back to back. That's 1. 2, they didn't have Pickens for 2 of those 3 games. And without Pickens, the drop off on their wide receiver depth chart is massive, in 2 of those games. And then they get him back. Still doesn't work. I understand why the defense is where they're feeling frustrated. The expectations for the offense have never been that high.
That's fair.
It's kind of don't lose the game for us. Can you make a couple explosive plays? And they're not even doing that. I'm not saying that they're holding up their end of the bargain, but defensively, for much of the season, you look at a lot of the advanced stats, especially before this run, they were operating like a top 6, 8, 10 type defense. Now, they didn't have Joey Porter Jr. for this game as well, so they have had some injuries, but just sort of a interesting, it was kind of a feel-good team for a lot of people for much of this season. And again, I still think they've overachieved, but now the vibes are bad, and now we see what this looks like. Right now, they'd have to go to Houston in the first round. Speaking of bad vibes, we'll get to them here in a second. But, if they lose in Week 18, they could end up going to Buffalo or Baltimore. And for all of Tomlin statistics about him as an underdog, man, I just don't see a great way for them to compete against those teams in the AFC. So tough one for the Steelers on Christmas. All right, let's take a break. We come back, talk about another team that looked a lot like the Chiefs, honestly, and another team that got to look like the Steelers in the second game on Christmas. All right, we are back on the Ringer NFL show. The Ravens, this game felt like it was over 3 minutes into the game. Ravens 31, Texans 2 in this game on Christmas Day in Houston. Ruiz, what was your big takeaway from the Ravens' perspective? Do we learn anything about them? Is this just, an affirmation of what we've thought about them? What was your takeaway for the Ravens?
I think their ability they're on defense to just put that Houston offense in a box. Like that's been a highly flawed offense all year long. We've talked about it all year long. But like when they've gone up against flawed defenses, they've been able to look competent. And Baltimore's been a flawed defense at times this year, especially early on in the year. I think that just reminded me of the defense I was watching last year in Baltimore, the one that also put this Houston offense in a box in the playoffs. They did it in the first game of the season. So I think it is a good sign for this defense that lost its defensive coordinator, that it still has this in them, this type of performance. But like we have to start with the offensive side, and we have to start with Derrick Henry. Yeah. We have to start with Lamar Jackson. The fact that you can't take away both. You have to choose which one you're going to let beat you on that day. And we saw last week, Pittsburgh was forcing the ball into Derrick Henry's hand, and we saw what happened. We saw Houston kind of do the same thing early on, and Derrick Henry was just gashing them. Like you said, 3 minutes into the game, you're right. After 4 carries, I was like, this game is over.
Yeah, this is over.
They have no chance of stopping this guy, and it just continued on. And then Lamar started getting going in the running game. He had that long touchdown run in the second half. This Ravens team is just as good as last year's Ravens team, I think. I think the only question is the ceiling of the defense, and I don't think it's quite as high as it was last year. I don't think Roquan Smith is playing at the same level he was last year. I don't think the secondary is as solid as it was last year. But it made me feel more confident about my Ravens Super Bowl pick is my takeaway from that game. And I don't know who stops this offense if it's rolling, if it's not beating itself with pre-snap penalties. And that's been the thing over the last couple of weeks. It's not beating itself anymore.
You even got Justin Tucker, Diante, making a couple kicks there. So yeah, this is another team that I think they felt good about themselves for a long time, although they haven't been in first place in the AFC North. It's not like they've gone wire to wire here. Now they're back in first place in the AFC North. They're in a good spot to host a playoff game in round 1. And then again, is it one of these weird things in sports where you have a great player, a great team, and they're knocking on the door and they're knocking on the door and they've had some disappointment, but the time they break through, can he go to Buffalo and beat Josh Allen, go to Arrowhead and beat the Chiefs? Like sometimes that happens with the great player. Like that's the type of season where they finally break through. So my mind was just watching the Chiefs and then the Ravens and then thinking about the Bills. I'm like, man, those games are going to be so good in January.
I mean, this feels like the mid-aughts Colts, right? Where Peyton Manning finally had his full complement of everything he needed. The tight end, both wide receivers, offensive line was playing better by the end of the year. They basically ran. Now, the flow of the season was a little bit different for that Indianapolis team that ultimately won the Super Bowl because they were just steamrolling basically everybody. And it kind of became clear that like, oh, this is different than the team that couldn't beat the Patriots a couple years ago. That was just getting bullied off the field against some more physical teams. But I think that my ultimate takeaway and why I'm drawing that comparison is I think that this is the kind of game that really punctuates the kind of gravity that Lamar Jackson has and what it creates for the rest of his teammates. I have to go and look. Derrick Henry has never seen a lower percentage of 8-man boxes on his rushing attempts in his career. And that says a lot about why he's averaging the highest yards per carry and the most yards before contact in his career. It's not just because he's playing in a more spread out offense, because I would say this existed even yesterday on Christmas. They had Patrick Ricard, Isaiah Likely and Mark Andrews on the field at the same time for a bunch of these snaps. They played pretty heavy personnel, but the fact that you always have to be aware of Lamar Jackson and that at the drop of a hat, they can go from this under center duo power gap scheme run game to basically saying, you know what, that Greg Roman stuff that worked for you in 2019, we can do that at a moment's whim, at a whim. And they were able to get into that. And now if you're an aggressive front like Houston, or if you're a defense that wants to blitz them, that wants to play aggressively and tight to the line of scrimmage, it's hard to do that if you've got to account for number 8 running on the edge. And the second you try to sell out to take away both, that's where you get the play action passing game, right? And that's why I think the volume of passes didn't need to be as high for them to win. But every time it seemed like he dropped back, there was instantly something there. And if it wasn't there, he could extend long enough to open a play up. That offense right now is just operating at peak capacity. And to Steven's point, cold weather game at home on the road, they have so many different levers that they can pull offensively, so many different personnel groupings they can be successful with and stress you out defensively. Outside of like Steve Spagnuolo being on a heater the way that he was in the AFC Championship game last year, I don't know how you slow this offense down.
I think another point from last year's AFC title game, they couldn't really run the football. I know the stats say they could run the football, but like they were losing the battle for the line of scrimmage. And I think their offensive line is just a little bit tougher this year. And I think they're going to be able to, like you said, go under center and run the football like they didn't do last year. That's just a different thing you have to deal with as a defense. And it was a thing that they needed in that AFC title game last year that they didn't have. This year, they do have it. And that was the reason why John Harbaugh hired Monken in the first place. Like he said it at his introductory press conference, we need a plan B. We need different ways of playing football. Before, we didn't have different ways of playing football. And I think this year, even more than last year, that's true. And Monken has so many different buttons he can press. And when Lamar's the one that you're activating with those buttons, like the possibilities are endless.
They've got every button now. I mean, really, it's just... I do like how Lamar in these games will just have the one drive where he reminds you, if I just need to do this myself and nothing. I like that 99-yard drive where he has the creation play to Mark Andrews and then just holds the ball and is having a nice chat with Danielle Hunter and then just fires it to Isaiah Likely. That 2-play sequence, it's like, yes, Monken deserves credit. Yes, the scheme is different. Yes, it's nice that they have options. But then in those high leverage moments, there's always going to be some times where it doesn't work. The play call doesn't work. The defense has a good call. The O-line gets beat. Then what happens? And you just see that. You don't see it as much as maybe, as you needed to in the past, but it's still there. I swear he looks, this has to be as healthy as he's ever been this time of the yeyear. That run he had where he said he was jogging afterwards and it was 21 miles per hour. I'm just man, that's another big thing, because that was the big thing that he missed those 10 games in 2 years and everyone brought up the injuries. And now the way he looks right now, not only not being injured, but now the way he looks is huge for them.
And there were 2 plays in that Chiefs AFC title game last year where he just got caught, where I think this year he's getting past the defense and go the one play where the ball got tipped and he caught it himself. He was really mad after that play. If you go back and watch it, he was slamming the ground after the play because he got tackled by a shoestring. I don't think 2024 Lamar or 2025 it will be. I don't think that version of Lamar is getting caught.
Yeah, no, he looks incredible. Ravens got to feel good. Defense is coming on as well. As we mentioned, another team that's got to feel great about where they're at here entering week 18 in the playoffs. On the other hand, honestly, we could keep this short. I don't know if you guys have new things to say. I don't. No. The Houston Texans, they haven't been good all season long, specifically offensively. They've had issues. The scheme hasn't been good. I think this was probably one of Stroud's worst games of the season. I still believe in Stroud, but there's no denying you watched that game.
It was a bad game. Yeah.
It was a bad game for CJ Stroud. So now you're adding that to it. Scheme's giving them no answers. Offensive line isn't good. They've had wide receiver injuries. They're 31st in offensive success rate, ahead of only the Cleveland Browns. That's unacceptable. I don't care how your offensive line is playing. So they've stunk. And then the defense that has been good statistically now has had back-to-back weeks where they face these AFC powerhouses, and it's not as good as maybe you thought before those 2 weeks. So maybe they win a playoff game if they host the Steelers or whatever at home, but this season's going to be a disappointment. I'll be shocked if we're not talking about them when they lose in the playoffs and go, everyone knew this was coming. This was what it was going to look like. And now they need to go back to the drawing board and be honest with themselves about how do you build around CJ Stroud here, both schematically and personnel wise in the seasons ahead.
I feel like I have to do some PR work for CJ Stroud to America. He has not been playing that badly. I know the stats kind of fit with how he played.
Yeah,
on
that
Christmas.
was his worst game of the season, probably.
But that's not how badly he's been playing. He was bad on Christmas, and I appreciate Noah Eagle. I think Noah Eagle was the one calling that game. I think Ian Eagle called the first game, saying okay, he's missing throws here, but his throws all season have not been like this. This has not been the problem all season, and that is the case. But because I saw people reacting, because it's an island game, it's going to happen. Would you say 65 million people watched it? But I feel like that's going to skew some perspectives on Stroud going into the offseason. I'm buying low on Stroud in the offseason.
Yeah.
To me, this is an easy decision to make if you're DeMeco Ryans. You can look at any position group and evaluate them within the offense and say that whatever they're running right now is getting less with more. Regardless of the injuries to the wide receiving core, Nico Collins should feel more impactful in every single game he plays in than he has this season playing within this offense. Obviously, I think that this is probably about as good as you could have expected Joe Mixon to look while he's available, and they still are dead last. They have a 30% success rate on runs. That's unacceptable. You're below the Raiders. You're below,
and it feels like that when you watch them.
Exactly. You know, like I was on a Blue Sky. I posted about that, and people were getting back to me like, "Oh, after every Ravens score, you can count on a first down run that's going to get stopped at the line of scrimmage and a bubble screen that goes for 2 yards, and now CJ Stroud's running for his life on third." And it just feels like it's a rinse and repeat cycle. I think that Bobby Slowick was a very bright mind. I think that he had some of the right ideas in terms of infrastructure of an offense coming from the Kyle Shanahan scheme. I just don't think that he was a dynamic enough play caller and thinker to be able to take what he was presented with in terms of this roster and their struggles up front and apply or pull any different levers. And that's what makes you a good coordinator and a good player in the league, right? Steven always says this isn't a do it league. This is a do it again league. And to me, the second that defenses started to get comfortable with what they wanted to do out of certain personnel groupings, it was obvious that they didn't have an answer. They did not have a changeup. They don't have another way to make the most out of their playmakers and their quarterback. And unless they make a change, and I know it's going to be tough for D'Amico to try to identify the next guy, now you have to start looking at this season from CJ Stroud as, are we looking at a nexus point where they make a change in terms of play caller and we see closer to what he was as a rookie? Or do they continue to bash their head up against the wall? And now we're talking about a guy, you know, approaching the end of his rookie deal and what he isn't anymore, as opposed to what he could be in his second contract going into his athletic prime.
It feels like there's a chance that he becomes the next Trevor Lawrence, where all the talent in the world, you watch the film and you think you're watching a top 10 quarterback. And then at the end of the game, you look at the box score and it's like a 79 quarterback rating. And like by the end of the year, he's 20th in EPA or 20th in success rate. I think this is a very important moment for D'Amico Ryans, and he needs to make the right move. I think we're at the point where he has no choice but to move on from Slowick. Maybe if they explode in the playoffs, which I doubt is going to happen, especially with their path now, he holds on to him. But like we've talked about Kyle Shanahan and Mike McDaniel struggling to find answers and to adapt to how defenses are playing them.
Right.
The same thing is happening to Houston, but they don't have Kyle Shanahan or McDaniel. They have a guy that was very much down the rung in terms of coaching hierarchy in San Francisco. So I don't know if you can have confidence in him figuring things out and figuring out how to fix what's broken.
It's just been, it's been so bad. It's not been like a little bit, all right, there's a game here and a game there. I just feel like this season, their offense has been one of the most disappointing units in the entire NFL. And
2 points.
It's crazy.
Derrick Henry was the best player on their offense. He was the best player on both offenses.
That's right. I mean, yeah, and it looked
2
like
points in front of Beyonce.
That's the most
Shameful.
embarrassing part. You can't be doing that. Yeah, you're never going to get that opportunity again. That was your one chance. Nobody slept at night probably after that performance. All right, those are the Christmas Day games. Again, Texans are in a similar boat to the Steelers. They're in the playoffs. Maybe they win a round one game. They're going to be at home, maybe against the Steelers. After that, I think it's going to get real ugly in the divisional round. And to your guys' point, they'll have some major questions to answer in the offseason.
Let's pick the Kansas City, Buffalo, Baltimore Derby. Who wins the divisional game in Buffalo, and who wins the AFC title game, in your opinion, right now?
Oof.
All right, Ravens.
Baltimore has to go to Buffalo. Oof.
I can't believe they lost to Gardner Minshew in September. Honestly, with Gardner Minshew has Gardner Minshew and Jameis Winston have too much influence over the Super Bowl this year, the path to the Super Bowl this year.
All right, I'm going to work backwards because I'm just going to think about it analytically and think the Ravens have to beat two of these guys. Well, Josh Allen has to beat two of these guys. Yeah. I'm going to say the Chiefs. I'm going to say the Chiefs beat the Bills at Arrowhead. Oh my God. I'm sorry. As I was saying it, I'm like, we should have a warning for Bills fans. Sorry. I'm even saying this. I'm going to say Chiefs beat the Bills at Arrowhead. Right. And I'm going to change listen, our official predictions will be after week 18. We will do full predictions. Right now, I'm going to say Chiefs beat the Bills at Arrowhead.
Even that's wrong. Our official predictions will be after the wild card game.
Right. Yes. Yeah. No kidding.
Well, we got to do playoff predictions and then game predictions.
I've got an AFC Championship game rematch from last year. I think Baltimore beats Buffalo, but ultimately loses to Kansas City on the road. Kansas City gets a chance at a three-peat.
I got Buffalo beating Baltimore. I think if it's in Baltimore, Baltimore wins that game by 10 points. If it's in Buffalo, I think it's a close game, and I think Buffalo pulls it out. Because we know, I can't trust Baltimore in a close game in a playoff game. They're going to do something to mess it up. Tucker's going to miss a field goal. Yeah. Mark Andrews going to drop a key pass on third down or something. I don't know. Zay Flowers fumbles on the goal line. Then I'm taking the Chiefs.
Oh no.
We're cowards.
Oh, no.
We're such cowards.
I know. Listen, the Bills and Ravens, like I was just looking at like every offense over the last 5-10 years. These are like high level offenses. They absolutely have a chance to put up big points on the Chiefs, and then it just becomes a matter of who's going to have the special teams mishap, who's going to have the fluky turnover, who's going to recover that fumble. Like absolutely, I think that will be a down to the wire class. I think all those games will be down to the wire. Final 2 minutes come down to that kind of thing. So I am in no way saying they can't beat them, but if you're asking me, I'm just looking at the chances. And here we are on December 26th. Picking the Chiefs to go to the Super Bowl.
Just to make it up to Bills fans, my heart does want either a Josh Allen or a Lamar Jackson Super Bowl win. I just need one of those guys
change,
to win.
Yeah. Little change. Mahomes has his. No one's going to think differently about Mahomes if they don't get there this year. A little change for content. We'll see if it happens or not. All right, let's go over this game. We went long on those, and rightfully so. They were big games. But let's talk Packers Vikings. We can do this a little bit quicker if we want to. The biggest game on the Sunday slate here. Here's the deal with the Vikings in this game. If they win and the Lions win, then it comes down to week 18. Which team gets the 1 seed? Which team wins the NFC North? They'll have the same record. Now, this is interesting. If the Vikings lose and the Lions win, then the Lions clinch it this week. So the Vikings cannot get the 1 seed regardless of what happens in the finale. But the Vikings play before the Lions here. So the Vikings play on Sunday afternoon. The Lions play on Monday night. And so if the Vikings win, the Monday night game doesn't really matter to the Lions. Like they can lose to the 49ers. It's still going to come down to week 18. So that's one interesting aspect of this. The other interesting aspect, Diante, is just like you got two of the best teams in the NFC with wild records where these records, Green Bay's 11-4. The Vikings are 13-2. Most years the Vikings have already have the division locked up and the Packers are battling for it. But the NFC North has been so wild this year that that's not the case. Are you looking to learn something about one of these teams in this game? Is there a matchup you're looking at? Where will your eyes go when we get Packers Vikings in the late window on Sunday afternoon?
I think that these two teams, if they're really going to make a case for winning the NFC, I think that the matchup in this game is actually going to give us the information we need for both of them. And it's Sam Darnold against Green Bay secondary. To me, that's where I'm really looking to see be sorted out in this NFC race. I want to see if Sam Darnold against a team that is going to run a bunch of simulated pressures. They're going to be down Jair Alexander in this game more likely than not. I want to see if Sam Darnold in a high stakes situation against a team that's going to throw a bunch of different looks at him up front to try to drop his eyes or make him rush his process. If he can continue to hang in the pocket and find Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison deep and in the intermediate areas of the field. And then on the other side of it, I want to see if Green Bay can hold up in coverage enough and if they can actually make this Minnesota offensive line and quarterback uncomfortable in the pocket and try to change their DNA on early downs in the passing game. Because to me, if Minnesota gets to operate at its usual tempo and they get to dictate what happens on first and second down with the play action passing game and being able to use Aaron Jones as a runner, I just think that this is going to be a rough matchup for Green Bay's defense. I think that Jordan Love and this offense can keep pace with anybody in the NFL, not just the NFC. But this is going to be a matter of, can Green Bay steal a possession with the turnover? Can they get a key sack that kills a drive? Can they, eliminate one of Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison to try to add some stress to Sam Darnold in the pocket, working through his progressions? If we get that from Green Bay, then I'm probably going to come in after these games and say I'm pretty comfortable picking them to win the NFC, depending on how the matchups shake out. And I think the same will be present in the other direction. If Minnesota's offense comes and runs Green Bay's defense off the field, I'll probably come in saying that I'm really comfortable with Sam Darnold in the NFC race, even knowing that he's probably the least talented quarterback of the top 4 teams in this conference.
Ruiz, is that where? What side of the ball are you looking at? Can this change any of your opinions about these two teams? Because as Diante was talking, I mean, these have been two sort of units or categories that I've been like, I'm not quite there yet. One is Sam Darnold. I've been vocal about it all season long, and here they are at 13-2 going into this weekend. Then the other one is the Packers defense, where I say, you know what? All right, they're a little turnover heavy. I mean, they have played better. They're all the way up to 6th in defensive DVOA, which, man, if you would have told me that before the season, I would have said home run higher. Jeff Hafley, I don't see that happening. So I think both these units are playing their best football right now. Even the Vikings offense, there was a while there where I was like, no, it's really their defense. Now their offense is top 10 in offensive DVOA, and Darnold is top 10 in a lot of these statistical categories. So I feel like for me personally, yes, I'm going to take the data from this game, but you'll probably hear me having the same conversation when we get into the playoffs. I just want to see it. I just want to see it more in the playoffs. So that's where I am.
Yeah, and I think it will be such a game plan type of game on both sides of the ball that if the game plans are different the next time around, it might change completely the matchup, and it just might be a different game. But for me, and this is like totally cliche and like, I don't know, surface level analysis, but like the turnover battle in this game is the most important thing for me. Jordan Love turned it over 4 times in the last game, and that was the reason why the Packers lost the game. You can also throw in the special teams in there. They missed 2 field goals in that game, and they lost by 2 points. But we didn't see, I don't think we got a chance to really see Jeff Hafley's defense go up against Kevin O'Connell's offense in that first game just because of the game script. They were up 28-0 in the first half, and Green Bay was playing comeback the whole way. Jordan Love had the knee injury, and Jordan Love is a player that moves around and throws off his back foot. Like, that's tough to be playing on one leg in that type of game. So I don't even think like the first game, which happened all the way back in September or early October in week 4, really tells us much about how this game is going to look. But if one of these defenses like dominates, especially in the turnover category, like whether it's Hafley's defense kind of making Darnold uncomfortable with those simulated pressures, making him hold on to the ball. I spoke about his average time to throw splits last week. If you can make him hold on to the ball and make him not comfortable with what he's seeing, I think you can get some turnovers there. And if Brian Flores does it again and makes Jordan Love into a turnover machine when he's playing on 2 healthy knees, I think that's very instructive. And I think that's something that's going to make me change my take on both of these teams going forward. Because I'm with you, like I didn't lose any confidence in Brian Flores, but I kind of lost a little bit of confidence in them being able to just hammer offenses like they were doing early on in the year. Yeah. And then
that's fair.
I think Sam Darnold has earned a little bit more trust, and that offense as a whole has earned a little bit more trust with avoiding turnover-worthy plays, which he wasn't doing. He wasn't getting punished at the beginning of the year, but he was putting the ball in harm's way. I think he's doing less of that now. So if the Packers can kind of bring back that early season version of Darnold, or the Vikings can bring back that injured version of Jordan Love, it's going to open my eyes. And I think I'm with Diante. I think I would pick whichever team comes out of this, if it is like a dominant showing, as the NFC favorite going into the playoffs.
Wait, so if the Vikings have a dominant performance here, you would pick them as the favorites in the NFC?
Yeah,
that's surprising.
I would.
If Sam Darnold protects the football and Brian Flores shows that this defense can reach the heights it was reaching in September, then why not? I think we have flaws across the NFC, especially with Detroit with their injuries.
Yeah.
The Eagles are dealing with injuries now, with Jalen Hurts possibly missing the game this weekend. So I don't know. It would be close.
Surprising. I had to make sure I was like, did I hear that correctly there? Okay.
If the Packers win by a wide margin, I would say not to speak over Steven. I would say it's not favored by a wide margin. I would just be looking at the resume of how these teams have played. I think that no matter how the seeding shakes out and how the matchups shake out in the playoffs, so much of what's going to happen on the NFC side is a matchups based thing. Like I said, I think Green Bay can beat just about anybody in the NFL, but I also acknowledge that Detroit is a bad matchup for them. I think that we've seen that this season, that Detroit just gives that defense problems in a way that I don't know if even the best of Jordan Love and that offense can keep pace with in a 1-game sample. I think that Minnesota is kind of a funky matchup for Philadelphia, and I think that they can still play with their other 2 NFC North rivals in that way. And then for Philly, I think that it's less about them being a mismatch for anybody and more just like their style of play is maybe the most disparate from the other teams in the NFC North, because they can win games without really needing much volume in the passing game at all. That doesn't really exist for the other top 3 teams in the NFC. So I do think it's going to be very matchups based. Maybe Philadelphia is the most insulated from matchups because they lean so heavily on that offensive line. I just think that I've seen more resume wise from the rest of the NFC North teams being explosive, having to play one another, and they've maintained their performance offensively against each other throughout this year. I don't know if I could pick against whichever team looks the best at the end of the year coming out of that division to not be the NFC representative in the Super Bowl. At least that's where it stands for me right now.
If the Packers dominate this game, I will have them as the favorites by a wide margin. If the Vikings dominated at home, I don't know. I don't know if I would have them by a wide margin. I just have them as the favorite.
This is the guy.
No, I'm saying they'll be the favorite.
My reporter instincts came back. Ask the follow-up, Sheil. Make sure, nail him down. Does he really mean that? So there you go.
Right.
All right. Man, the NFC playoffs are going to be tough to pick.
On this podcast.
Is there still a chance that the Packers can pass the Vikings in the playoffs? I haven't looked up the tiebreaker, but I feel like that's a big deal in this because there's a big difference between going to Atlanta and potentially facing a rookie quarterback and going to Sean McVay and Matthew Stafford on the road. Like that could be a loss. Even if I believe this team is a Super Bowl contender, I think any team could lose in that scenario. We saw Buffalo lose.
I think it's possible. No, I don't think it's possible. I think Green Bay is locked in as a wild card team no matter what. I think they can play to make sure that there are 5, but I don't think that they can. No,
that's what I mean. Like I think the difference between 5 and 6 is huge because 5 is going to Atlanta, 6 is going to LA to face Stafford and McVay.
Yeah, I don't think they can jump the Vikings right now. I think the last time I checked. Yeah.
I'll give you a full answer on that when we get back from break. We will do out. Who do you like in this game? Real quick, actually. Who are you picking? I picked the Packers, just playing to type here. Sam Darnold's going to be like hoisting the Lombardi, and I'm going to open our Super Bowl pie with, I'm not sure I totally.
I'll be right there with you. Don't worry. You'll have backup. But no, I'm picking Green Bay. The Vikings opened up as a favorite, and I think the line has moved, and Green Bay's the favorite now. Yeah. I'm with those people that have been hammering the Packers.
Okay.
Look, I've been on the boat. I've had to take a lot of arrows from people with power rankings about why Green Bay has maintained their space in the top 8, in spite of the fact that they haven't beaten their NFC North rivals, their top NFC North rivals. So I would like for my own takes to see Green Bay win this football game. I think that Minnesota's just got the edge at home. I think this is going to be a track meet either way. I'm just going to pick Minnesota based on the way that they've been playing against some of the other good teams in the NFC to be able to maintain their level. And maybe they get that rare Jordan Love bomb that turns into an interception, or they might be able to make him a little bit more uncomfortable in the pocket than we've seen over the last few weeks.
Yeah, I mean, but the more I think about it, in a 1-game playoff, the Vikings absolutely can pretty much beat
they can beat
any of these
in the
teams.
NFC.
Yeah. They really can with the things they have going for them here. The Vikings can drop to the Packers cannot get the 4 seed. So there was no scenario.
It would be the 5th seed.
The Packers can get the 5th. I thought you said the 5th seed. Okay, yes, the Packers can get the 5th seed here, and the Vikings could be. You said could they be the 6th seed?
Yeah,
they could. Yeah, according to FTN, the Vikings have a 36% chance actually to be the 6th seed. The Packers have the same chance, 36% chance to be the 5 seed.
The issue here is that if Detroit wins and they don't have anything to play for in Week 18, and then they get to sit all their guys against Minnesota, and Minnesota would be incentivized to make sure they won that football game. So it's very conditional, I think, which is why I think the percentage in my mind is a lot lower than what the actual mathematics would imply.
Unless something really weird happens with their backups or whatever, highly unlikely, but possible.
If that wild card matchup happens, though, Minnesota somehow has to go to LA and the Rams. I think I'm picking McVay and Stafford in that game.
All right. We shall see. We'll have plenty of time to talk about all of it. We'll take a break. We come back. We will run through our picks for Week 17. All right. We are back on the Ringer NFL show. Time for our picks. Once again, minus 120 odds or better. We each pick 3 every week. The loser gets assigned the slop game of the week. And Diante, unfortunately, that was you last week, 0-3. Ruiz 2-1. I was 3-0. Ruiz, I haven't even looked at the slate here for this. I mean, there's so many island games. Like, I don't know. Yeah. What have you looked? What is the Sunday? So, all right. Are we going to go with the obvious? What do you got?
There's an obvious one.
There's 2 obvious ones, actually.
What's the obvious one?
I'm looking
They're both
at
in the same window. You've got Saints, Raiders, and Jags, Titans.
Correct. Oh, those would be the 2.
Saints, Raiders is the worst of those 2 games, I think. No. Mason Rudolph, Mac Jones. Enjoy that, Diante.
But
that's fine. I get to watch Brian Thomas Jr.
I was going to say, is Devondre Sweat healthy, right? You get to watch your boy. You were ahead of the curve on him before anyone else. All right, so there you go. Now, this is tightening up, though, the overall race here. We are all separated by only 4 games, with Ruiz still in the lead at 30-18. I'm 26-22. Diante 25-23. We're all over 500 ringer wise, right, guys. I'm just saying, 3 picks a week. We're all over 500.
Sheil's getting hot, man. She's gotten hot over the last 3-4 weeks, man.
I think it's going downhill this week. I was sorting out even the picks I post. I'm like, I don't like any of these. Give me more props. Come on, FanDuel. Just send me a few more prop options there for some of these. 563 winning percentage as a group. Now I feel like we need to establish we'll just do 3 picks each week through the Super Bowl, right? And the winner gets crowned after that. That way there's no shenanigans about double this, double that. We're not doing it this week. Are we all on board with that? Or does anyone have any other proposals?
I mean, that opens up the door for me to be able to get back in this thing. So yeah,
the playoffs, that's when everyone's betting on these games anyway. So I feel like we got to do it through the playoffs.
I think we need a new format for the championship round just because there's only 2 games. But I think we could just do, you pick the lines in each game, you pick the over under in each game. And then Super Bowl, there's a bunch of props.
But you could do props. You just pick your 3 best, even with only 2 games, you pick your 3 favorite picks. It could be a prop. It could be a side. It could be a total. Fine. We can get to that. All right. But we're all on the same page. We're doing 3 picks a week through the Super Bowl, and then we will crown a winner here. All right, Diante, start us off. What do you got? What is your first pick?
So the first one I'm going with is Cardinals Rams over 47.5 points. I just think that both styles of offense are bad matchups for the defense they're facing against. I don't know if the first game was really representative of either team in that moment. The Cardinals basically ran the Rams off the field. They were still trying to work out what they were going to be defensively at that point in time. Obviously, the Rams are just out of the preseason with other offensive line injuries. There was just a lot going on and missing for that team to open the season. What we've seen from the Rams over the last month or so is them finally gelling up front. So you see the run game really starting to take off. Kyren Williams has been playing his best football. And I think that the way the Rams like to run the ball, the Cardinals can't hide from it. We saw that last week with the Panthers. They got a bunch of heavy bodies on the field, got under center, used a lot of downhill runs with Chuba Hubbard. And now the Cardinals can't do all their interesting blitzing off of edges and 3 high looks where you can maybe hide the rotation so you can maybe get an advantage at the point of attack. I think the Rams are going to borrow a lot from that and be able to use that to their advantage. And then on the other side, the thing that I've always liked about the Cardinals is they use multiple tight end sets, but remain in spread looks, right? They're able to stay in the gun. They use the threat of the quarterback run game to set up their play action passes. I think that's how you want to attack the Rams. So I think that this is going to be a pretty high flying game. I expect this to be one of the higher scoring games we have this weekend.
All right. I like it. I'm looking at my sampling here, and I think I'm going to go with the same game. And I think I'm going to go with Matthew Stafford over 20.5 completions. I agree with what you were saying, Diante. They want to run the football. They will run the football, but completions aren't too hard to come by against the Arizona Cardinals, especially nice controlled weather environment in LA there. So I think Matthew Stafford can get some easy completions in this game. Doesn't necessarily have to throw for monster yardage numbers, because I do think they'll be methodical. They'll be efficient. But I saw that number and I thought he can get me 20.5 completions. I feel like I've made the Stafford over completions bet like 17 times this year. And I don't know that it's been that good to me, but you know what? I'm like a cornerback, just erasing the last place from my memory. Moving on. Matthew Stafford over 20.5 completions for my first one. All right. Ruiz, what do you got?
I'm picking some low hanging fruit here. I'm going the under in the Eagles Cowboys. It's 39.5. Kenny Pickett is taking the first team reps in practice. Jalen Hurts missed another practice with a concussion. CeeDee Lamb has been shut down for the year, and that was basically the whole offense after Dak's injury.
This is going to be a slop.
What a brutal game.
Yeah. Even the first game, which the Eagles dominated, the Eagles were obviously a little bit healthier. I think it was 40 total points. So we just need one less point in this matchup, and we got a potential Kenny Pickett versus Cooper Rush. I think this is going to be one of those ugly Eagles-Cowboys games, 19-14. I don't know. It's not going to be good football.
I will say this is like as bad a time of year for them to be missing Jalen Hurts, because I think what they wanted to do offensively against Washington, the way they had prepped for it. I think you started to see it in that first drive, going a little bit more empty. You see the quarterback draw. I think that they were starting to strike something in the passing game coming out of the Steelers game. Maybe they're trying to find something that's a little bit more comfortable for Hurts. So missing him now in a game that would have been very instructive for them against an elite pass rush, against an improved secondary over the last few weeks, this would have been a great data point for them going into the postseason to continue to hammer home the point of whether or not they were going to be efficient enough in their drop back passing game. So I am looking at Kellen Moore to see, like, when you don't have your quarterback as a running threat, when teams are going to be loading up the box a little bit more often, what can you do to keep things loose for Saquon Barkley? And are you going to be able to get the ball to your best receivers, even if you don't have your starting QB?
Just run the zone read for Kenny Pickett. Like, there's nothing else he can do.
Last week, it was interesting. When Hurts left the game and they ran the ball, I think Saquon had like a 20% success rate.
Yeah.
I know it's a small sample, but yeah, they were running from pistol and running from zone read. And it wasn't necessarily like, and we talked about this on the Philly special, I got to get the plug in, but it wasn't necessarily like just that backside defenders making the plays. It was just like the linebackers were just like, there was half a second, pause there. And it really did look like Saquon Barkley with the Giants. Now that's tough. You had the backup coming in the middle of a game there. But yeah, I am interested to see what that run game looks like without Hurts in there.
I feel like it's like a reverse stereotype where they see Kenny Pickett and they're like, oh, pocket pass. Kenny Pickett's never been a good pocket passer. He's a little bit athletic. And I think like that's the one thing that impressed me in his Steelers career was he was a little more athletic than I realized, and that he could run the ball a little bit better than I realized. Just run zone read with him.
I don't want any more plays with that land with Kenny Pickett handling the football than is absolutely necessary.
He's got injured.
He's got those gloves. He can hold on to the ball.
This could be like what you said with the Chiefs. Sometimes you luck into something. I don't want anyone to get injured, but I would rather see their third string quarterback is Tanner McKee. The ball comes out quickly.
He's the better of the backup.
He's better than Pickett.
He's better than Pickett.
He knows he's not athletic, so he would just the passing game. The ball would come out. He's got a better arm than Kenny Pickett by a mile. I'm just saying. I was kind of wondering. I kind of wanted to see what this passing game looks like with a quarterback like that, but I don't think we're going to see.
I saw some takes where people said Kenny Pickett played well in that game or like did enough. No, he was.
No.
He was bad.
No. I mean, my big now it's just we're just crushing Kenny Pickett. My big thing when I watch him is like he's not that talented of a player.
No,
that's the thing.
But he plays like it, right? Like he tries to.
Yes, correct. All right. Enough. Sorry, Kenny Pickett. You're dealing with bruised ribs.
He got to be a first-round pick. We don't have to say sorry for him. He's living the life.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. He's living a good life. All right. That was, where were we? You went the under. The under on Eagles Cowboys. All right, Diante, you're up.
All right, next for me, I'm going Cortland Sutton over 66.5 yards receiving in this Broncos-Bengals game. This is another one that I'm really fascinated to see how the offenses match up with their opposing defenses in different ways, right? It's good on good in a lot of ways for Denver's defense versus Cincinnati's, though. And I think kind of questionable on questionable in the other direction. But I think that the best of Bo Nix's plays from the pocket have been pushing the ball deep downfield to Cortland Sutton. I think that there will be plenty of opportunities to do so, especially if they're able to strike something up in the run game and set up those deep play action shots that have really helped this passing game out. So yeah, I'm going with Cortland Sutton. I'm really fascinated to see if Denver can bounce back from this, from that comeback loss to the Chargers and be able to lock in their place in the playoffs. This is going to be a really fascinating game for me, and whether or not Cincinnati can keep their playoff hopes alive.
Yeah, they can back their way in, but the easiest way is win one of the final two for the Broncos, and they're in. So that is a Saturday game. I like that one quite a bit as well. All right, my next one, I'm going to the Diante Lee school of picks. He had this one a couple of weeks ago when he was sick. I'm not sick yet. Hopefully it stays that way. Baker Mayfield over 248.5 passing yards against the Carolina Panthers. Game's in Tampa. They're hosting Carolina. I don't know. I just look at that Panthers defense is not great. We've talked about the Bucs offense where the ball can come out and short completions can turn into big gains, and you still have Mike Evans in that game. So 248.5 over for Baker Mayfield as the Bucs host the Panthers, and then they got to root against the Falcons and hope they can get their way back into the playoff picture going into Week 18.
Yeah, I think he played well on Sunday night. They had some
They
ridiculous
had a lot of
turnovers.
yards,
Some like very 1% turnovers. Ball gets snatched out of your receiver's hands in the end zone. Your running back gets the ball stripped out right by the sideline, and probably what could have been a go-ahead or game-tying drive for them. I expect them to be able to move the ball at will on Carolina's defense.
All right. Ruiz, what do you got?
I'm going to go to the Monday night game. I'm going to take the Lions -3.5 against San Francisco. I'm very confused by this line. Like, I know there's history between these two teams with the NFC Championship last year. I know San Francisco is at home. I guess I can't even say the offense has been playing. I don't understand this line at all. That's what I'm going to leave it at. I think the Lions are a much better football team. I think San Francisco has kind of given up on the season, especially after last week when they were eliminated from the playoffs. I think the Lions still have a lot to play for, including the division, which I know they want to win. I know they want that playoff path to go through Detroit and Ford Field, and I think they're going to make a statement in this game.
There you
if
go.
this game
I
was
guess
within one possession, I would be floored. I think that knowing Detroit and how badly I think they really want to stamp themselves as contenders in spite of their injuries, and knowing how the NFC Championship game went, I think Dan Campbell's going to have his team with their hair on fire coming into this game. This should be a blowout.
Yeah, I like that as well. Yeah, like I said earlier, I guess the only thing would be is if the Vikings lose. And no, not if the Vikings lose. If the Vikings win earlier in the weekend and then the Lions know it doesn't matter if we win this game or not. But I'm with you on like a Dan Campbell team. Right. I don't think they play that way. If it was another coach or another organization, then maybe I believe him when he's like, no, we're going there to win the game. I'm like, yeah, I totally understand. I think you are going to go there to win the game. So it'll be interesting to see. You still have Shanahan again, like it's the Lions defense. Like, can they put up a lot of points against Detroit? But yeah, on the other side of the ball, it's just like you look at Detroit every week. I mean, it was what you said last week, Ruiz, and I was thinking about it, like during the week. It is so funny that they're spending practice time doing fake fumble plays, and these other teams like can't get lined up. It's just like it's not the haves and the have-nots this year. The haves are having a lot of fun and doing this weird types of things, and then these other teams are just so incompetent, like they can't do anything. I do wonder some of these horrible offenses. They look at that Lions play, they're watching the highlights when they get home from their terrible game, and they're just like, what the hell, man? This is how you're spending your practice time. So that was an excellent point by you. All right, Diante, what do you got? You got one more, right?
Yeah, my third and final is going to be taking Jaden Daniels going over 48.5 rushing yards against the Falcons. I think that the Falcons are going to allow plenty of space up front for him to take advantage. And I just think in general, and this is a credit to Jaden Daniels, I think that he's been able to avoid the Cliff curse really by leaning on his legs and to get this offense out of trouble. I don't know if things have been any different from a design perspective. You're able to connect on a couple busted coverages and just bad coverage plays last week against Philadelphia. But in the end, what broke the game open was the fact that Daniels was using his legs. We saw that the week before against New Orleans as well. They were able to build up that lead behind Jaden Daniels being a dynamic playmaker. I think that that's just going to be what carries him the rest of the way for this season. And while I do think Atlanta has obviously got a lot to play for, and I expect them to play hard in this game, I just think that front does not bode very well against a guy as quick and as fast as Jaden Daniels. So I expect him to be used as a design runner and really at his most dangerous when he's scrambling against the Falcons. Underrated,
fun Sunday night game that I'm sure we'll be talking about Sunday night. Falcons against the Commanders there. All right, my last one. I don't know. Maybe this kind of a sucker bet. I don't know, but I'm going to take the over in Packers Vikings. These are two of the most explosive offenses in the NFL. I kind of just trust the offenses to be able to figure it out. It's indoors. It's in Minnesota. I think we're going to see a lot of points in there. I know the Packers can be methodical, but the Vikings aren't necessarily methodical. They're just going for the chunks over and over again. Even if you have some turnovers, that might work in my favor. The offenses get good field position there. So it's a big number, 48.5, but I think we see a lot of points in that game. So I'll make that my last one.
Yeah, I think if we see a low scoring game in that one, we're going to have a lot of things to rethink on the Sunday night show. It's going to change my perception of both teams.
All right, Ruiz, what do you got? What's your last one?
I'm going to go Dolphins -6.5 against the Browns. And this is just based on how the Browns players are talking this week. Like they're all thinking about next year, and they're all thinking about their next team, it seems like. I think it was Myles Garrett talking about like he wants to play for a contender, and if they're rebuilding, he's not interested in being a part of it. Denzel Ward was asked about it. He's like, yeah, me too. I agree with him. Then Joel Bitonio was also saying it. Like, it seems like Cleveland has their mindset on, or their players at least have their mindset on 2025. And really that whole organization should have their mindset on 2025. And I think the Dolphins have been playing well over the second half. Like, obviously there's been problems. They didn't make the playoffs, and Tua has had his bad showings, but against a bad team, I expect this offense to show out. And I think the defense has been fine and can handle DTR, who is currently probably the worst starting quarterback in the NFL.
I was looking for the under, Ruiz, the DTR under passing yards. I took it last week. Unfortunately, not available. I understand, you got a business to run. You can't be putting stuff like that out there. But man, that was going to be my lock. Once again,
what would have been like the lowest you would have gone?
It's a good question. I have thought about this. I don't know. Well, he did. He threw for what, 160 or something?
160 something, mid 160s.
So
145 and a half. You taking over or under, Sheil?
What number?
145 and a half.
145? Oh man. I don't think under any scenario would I have picked the over for one of my things, but probably under 160. I think I would have had to start thinking.
I wanted to set it as aggressively as possible to see
you can't,
what your real opinion was of DTR.
He's still an NFL player. It just takes a couple downfield passes. But Ruiz, you're right. We've had a few of these. Maybe it'll be a fun offseason. Myles Garrett. I think Max Crosby said something during an interview, right? Garrett Wilson. So who knows? Maybe it's setting up. It could be nothing, but maybe we're setting up for some player movement in the offseason. All right, to recap here, I have got, let me see what I choose. Matthew Stafford over 20 and a half completions. Baker Mayfield over 248.5 passing yards. And finally, oh no, 3 more overs for me? That's not good. Packers Vikings over 48 and a half total points. Diante, what do you got?
Yeah, I'm the softy. I'm always going over. I've got Cardinals Rams over 47 and a half points. Cortland Sutton going over 66 and a half receiving yards, and Jaden Daniels going over 48 and a half rushing yards.
I guess I'm the curmudgeon because I got the under in Eagles Cowboys 39 and a half. I got
your holiday spirit, man.
Not in Dallas. Not going to be watching that game. I'll tell you that much. I got the Lions minus 3.5 against San Francisco and the Dolphins minus 6.5 against Cleveland.
If you would have told Ruiz back in August, you're going to be taking Tua minus 6.5 outdoors at Cleveland in week 17, he would have thought, what happened this season? What is going on here? But
just 3 letters. It's all you would have had to told me. DTR.
DTR. There you go. And you would have known. All right. Thanks to everybody for listening. Thanks to Diante. Thanks to Ruiz. Thanks to producer Christopher Sutton. Additional production supervision by Conor, Nevins, and Arjuna Ramgopal. Everyone enjoy the days and days and days of football. We'll be back after the second to last day of football this week, which is Sunday. Not a lot of games, but we will recap them. We'll recap the big action, update you on the playoff picture, do all that fun stuff on the Ringer NFL show. Until then, everyone have a great weekend. We will talk to you soon.